oversees a team of strategic partner managers that work with news organizations, associations, and journalists, helping us to leverage the Facebook tools, assist in our digital transformations, and helping media to build sustainable business models. Ferez has a long history in and around the media, is passionate about entrepreneurship and startups, has co-founded and successfully exited startups both in the US and Middle East, North Africa, and is currently an investor and active advisor or board member to a variety of startups around the world. Unlike myself, he is fluent in English, Arabic, Spanish, and Portuguese, has lived and worked in the US, Europe, Africa, and South America, and as Ricardo said, is joining us today from Dubai, where he's lived for the past 10 years. And without anything else from me, I'll turn over the floor to Ferez.
Thank you. And very nice to be with all of you. Un placer que estar con todos ustedes. Yo tengo mucho cariño para Latinoamérica, pasé mucho tiempo ahí y nací en Brasil, aunque no sea de la región. Vamos a presentar una presentación hoy para todos ustedes y luego haremos un fire chat y unas preguntas. La presentación será en inglés, pero luego sería un placer tomar preguntas en español o en inglés o lo que queráis. I think I'm going to need some help with the presentation. Great. So again, as was mentioned, my name is Faris Akkad. I head the media partnerships team for news for what we call growth markets, which include LATAM, APAC, and Middle East and Africa. And thank you for giving us the time today. I think today, more than ever, it is important that we work collaboratively. We understand that in the grand scheme of things, Facebook plays a pretty small role in the overarching news ecosystem. Still, working together, we can and do deliver value to publishers. I'd like to take a few minutes to provide you an overview of why Facebook works to support news, and then what that value looks like. Next slide, please. This is me. Next slide. So we'll start with the idea that there are two things that we can rely on in news. Next slide. First, that it's always evolving. Multiple concepts that we've seen in news, the rush to publish, the 24-hour news cycle, social media, the increase in opinion and at the expense of objective fact-based reporting, the growing importance of video, etc., etc. Change is the only constant that we see. Next, please. Second, that journalism remains as important a component of our democratic society as ever. It is both these things, change and the role of journalism that it plays in democracy, that underpins our commitment to the news industry. Indeed, our commitment to help news manage constant change and help grow audiences and develop sustainable business models is anchored in the fact that only if news organizations thrive can they fulfill their important role in society. Next slide, please. And how are we committed to support journalism? Well, the key to supporting journalism and working with the news industry is the dedicated team we have formed to establish partnership and strategically address the challenges the industry is facing. We are committed to overcoming these challenges by committing to greater integrity on our platform so people can be connected to news they trust, by supporting programs to support digital transformation, encouraging the reinforcing sustainable business models, by investing in free tools and products specifically designed to drive revenue, as well as readership, and help publishers reach a wider audience through free distribution, as well as products that drive greater audience engagement. We want to work for and with news businesses so together we can build a sustainable future for journalism. Next slide, please. We are committed to working together to find ways of supporting journalism and helping news organizations develop business models that are sustainable for the long term while are doing what's right for our users as well. And the value we provide to news organizations comes primarily through programs, partnerships, and products. Next slide, please. Committed to integrity and media literacy is an important part of programming in our commitment to improving. Sorry, having a fire alarm.
That's the second alarm that we've had to deal with this morning. It's a pleasure of Zoom meetings.
Apologies for that. I think. Well, I'm gonna plow through. So if you see some flames, let me know. So to improving the integrity of information on our platform, so people can stay connected to information and news they trust. Next, please. Facebook is a place of multiple voices, and managing a community of more than 3.1 billion users is quite a challenge. We understand that we are not the arbiters of truth. That's why we rely on several organizations that support us. Since 2016, we have developed programs and initiatives to guarantee the integrity of our platforms. Next slide. Our approach to integrity is anchored in our work to remove content that violates the community standards and ads policies, reduce distribution when misinformation is identified by our fact-checking partners, inform with strong warning labels and notifications on fact-checked content so people can see what our partners have concluded and decide for themselves what to read, trust, and share. In addition to invest in third-party fact-checking that we continue to work with at all levels to improve media literacy. Next, I'm going to show you a video of how third-party fact-checking works. With note that third-party fact-checkers that we partnered with are certified globally and recognized by International Fact-Checking Network. Next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit through the video. Oh no, it's not playing. It's okay. So basically, what happens is whenever something is posted on the platform and flagged by a user to be potentially inaccurate, this is then escalated to an independent fact checker, one of our partners, and they review it. And upon their independent fact checks, if they identify that there's inaccuracies in this post, then they can reduce the distribution of that content to up to 80%. And if there's repeated violations, then there are strikes that take place on that page. And eventually that could lead to the suspension or even the deletion of that page. If you go to the previous slide, you can see here are the countries in which we have partnered with local and regional fact-checking organizations. Third-party fact-checking has full coverage in LATAM. In less than 2 years, before the program was launched in LATAM, which was May in 2018, we have full coverage in Portuguese and Spanish markets, leveraging our partnerships with AFP Factual. Today, we collaborate with 9 fact-checking organizations in Latin America, all certified by the International Fact-Checking Network. And every time a content is marked as false by them, its distribution is reduced on Facebook. Our fact-checking partners in the region will go through them in a second. Next slide, please. No, the one before. Also working with the news industry outside of the digital space, working with publishers of all kinds to innovate and adopt business models to meet the challenges of digital transformation are key components to a long-term commitment to the entire news ecosystem. As a partner in the ecosystem, our commitment is to support journalists and news organizations is anchored in the importance of their work to our societies and communities. Our efforts are wide-ranging, and they include investment in innovation, product training, professional and industry development, and most importantly, people. It is the investment in our people, their expertise, their passion, their hard work that makes all other investment and initiative that we support effective. Next slide, please. Which brings us to the Facebook Journalism Project. While we understand the important role we play within the news ecosystem, the tools and products we provide underscore that role. That's why in 2017, we established the Facebook Journalism Project to work with the news industry and provide access to programs, resources, and information that can help you succeed beyond our platforms. Through these programs, we support the development and sustainable business models and digital innovation of the industry and have committed $300 million over 3 years to fund this work. A key strategy to this work is to develop robust partnerships across the industry. We partner with publishers and news organizations, as well as news industry, not-for-profit, and other academic-like institutions. Next slide, please. It is in working with these news industry organizations, like Society of Professional Journalists, that we establish a robust training program. In fact, we have trained more than 13,000 journalists in person and across 46 countries since we began in 2017. Another 100,000 people have participated in courses we've created with Pointer Institute, presented in 14 different languages, to learn how to leverage technology to better reach readers. This year in LATAM, we moved fast to adequate the new reality of bringing fast responses to support the ecosystem in its digital transformation. Local partnerships are key for us to provide grant funding, training, and coaching to newsrooms to help them connect and monetize their audiences both on and off the platforms. Our investments include partnerships with the following organizations in LATAM, the ones that you see on screen. Next slide, please. By creating and funding regional programs and initiatives, we can develop programs that address truly regional and country needs. Some of these examples are Video Accelerator LATAM. 58 news publishers participated in the program between 2018 and 2020 in Argentina, Chile, and Brazil. Publishers work closely with mentors on everything from improving the technical aspects of video production to learning how to structure teams for better collaboration for a newsroom culture transformation and innovation into the new digital narratives. This year, the Reader Revenue Accelerator in LATAM selected 18 grantees to receive, in addition to the COVID-19 grant support, a 10-week mentorship program, as well as a week coaching session to help news organizations accelerate their business transformation based on a reader revenue model. Participants also have access to a wider community of more than 120 news organizations from different Facebook Journalism Project accelerators created around the world. Another key program specifically designed to support news organizations' ongoing learning and development of their digital capabilities is the Facebook Journalism Project Local News Accelerator. Our first Local News Accelerator program in Brazil began in July 2019. 10 local news Brazilian print outlets from different states representing all Brazilian regions, which we'll go through in a second, were selected to participate in 12 weeks program in partnership with ICFJ, focused on accelerating their business models to be more sustainable, helping them to find and retain audiences. During this period, they met and participated in webinars with specialists from international news groups. They also, with mentors, received financial support to create their own projects. Next slide, please. The 10 local news Brazilian publishers together generated $3 million in customer lifetime value by increasing their paying subscribers by more than 10,000 and their registered users by nearly 600,000. They did this using grant funding provided by Facebook and implementing the lessons learned during the 3 months of intensive training in the accelerator program. In 6 months, A Gazeta drove 300,000 new registrations and grew their daily subscription conversion by a rate of 30%. O Popular drove an 80% increase in newsletter subscription growth. NSC new newsletters converted 120,000 new subscribers. These are just some examples of case studies of our programs. Next slide, please. Here are the news publishers that participated in this year's Reader Revenue Accelerator in Latin America to accelerate their business transformation based on a reader revenue model. Next slide. We're also responding to different business needs and different cohorts. Always listening to the news ecosystem, this year, the Facebook Journalism Project and Winifra are launching the Cultural Change Ignition Program for Latin American news publishers, an executive program that will provide its participants with insights and mentoring in order to activate internal cultural change within the news organization. The program's goals is to help the selected executives update their digital and management skills at the guide to their company to guide their company into the future. Running from October 2020 to January 2021, the Ignition program will provide attendees with a series of tools and resources to help them ignite and navigate change in their organizations. And there are also our newest initiative, Media Shapers Disruption Series, the program for news media C-level in partnership with the Wharton Business School that was born as a spin-off of our Media Shapers Discussion Series program in partnership with SIP. After co-hosting 2 insightful closed-door meetings with Latin America's C-level from top news media outlets, we realized that the COVID-19 crisis accelerated their plans for digital transformation. Despite the differences between markets, backgrounds, nature of the publisher, or the status of their digital transformation plans, all of them expressed that the will to prioritize long-term overdue changes to the areas that we are exploring to tackle in this first edition. So we are having C-levels to partner with the Wharton School to convene educational experiences featuring notable leadership experts in order to inspire them for the future trends across the main areas of the traditional organization and impact of different technologies. The program includes the delivery and certification of a co-branded certificate by FJP and Wharton. Next slide, please. Most of what we do to support news is planned. But when the unforeseen happens, we try to pivot our priorities and respond as best as we can to help. For example, the global coronavirus crisis, an economic impact that is having a particular hard one on you as a news industry and as an economy in general. In response to a failing ad revenue and other economic factors, Facebook moved to provide support to news. Facebook invested $2 million to support Latin American news during COVID-19. The Facebook Journalism Project announced in May a partnership with the International Center of Journalism, ICFJ, a nonprofit organization focused on promoting quality journalism around the world, to launch a $2 million fund to help news organizations in Latin America during the COVID-19 crisis. Designed to support publishers across the region, the new program offers grants, mentoring, and training to help news organizations accelerate their digital transformation. The fund addressed publishers' immediate and critical needs, as well as assist in their work to engage and connect their local communities online while publishing trusted information about COVID-19. Grants could be used for initiatives such as helping launch newsletters, lift paywalls, hire freelance journalists, strengthen data reporting, create online event, fund IT needs, launch software services and infrastructure, support digital distribution methods, and buy personal protection equipment to keep journalists safe, as well as ensure basic continuation of their work and business. Providing reliable information so people can stay safe is especially critical at this moment. And we know that the news industry is facing unprecedented challenges and working under extraordinary conditions. That is why we are partnering with ICFJ to support quality journalism across the region and help publishers on their digital transformation journey. Mentoring and training in the program was led by Tim Griggs, former New York Times executive, along with a team of experts. This partnership expands Facebook Journalism Project collaboration with ICFJ, which developed in 2019 4 accelerator programs for news organizations across Latin America. Next slide, please. While our commitment to improving integrity of information on our platforms, our programs supporting the digital transformation and products on the platform that deliver value and revenue to news organizations are important. We are continuously committed to working together to find ways to support journalism and helping news organizations develop business models that are sustainable for the long term, while are also right for our users, as I mentioned earlier. And here I would like to address the announcement that we made recently regarding news in Australia. As you've likely seen, we've made a reluctant choice to remove the ability of users and publishers to share news on Facebook, assuming the current proposed legislation by the Australian government passes. We are disappointed by the potential outcome. This is not what we wanted, and the decision has nothing to do with our ongoing global commitment to journalism. And Facebook Journalism Project will continue, and we continue to invest heavily in news around the world. Facebook has called for regulation that will help, not hinder, the relationship between technology companies and news organizations. Meaningful collaboration allows us to build innovative and sustainable solutions to support journalism. Together, we need to work on this. We support this idea because journalism is important to society and critical for a healthy economy, a healthy democracy. Working with publishers globally, we are investing in tools and programs that help news businesses adapt to the changing digital landscape. We are grateful for your partnerships and proud that what we have built so far, and look forward to what we want to build in the future. And there are more plans to do so, continuing to deliver value to news organizations. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, we will continue our ongoing investments around the world in the following areas. We are accelerating our plans to expand Facebook News internationally. We are considering the UK, Germany, France, India, and Brazil for launching in the next 6 to 12 months. Wherever we decide to launch Facebook News, we aim to have commercial deals with high quality news publishers to ensure their content is available on this new product. Helping publishers reach new audiences has been one of our most important goals with our US launch. And we have found that over 95% of the traffic Facebook News delivers to publishers is incremental to the traffic that they already receive from newsfeed. We're also planning to launch more tools to support your subscription business. News organizations around the world are increasingly focused on subscriptions to help drive their business. Facebook has built a new account linking tool that provides a better experience for people on Facebook when they see and access content from publishers that they subscribe to. We are collaborating with publishers around the world to test this new product to improve the user experience. We're also building enduring business value through a global accelerator program. We'll continue our investment in our premier business training programs. One of the most successful collaborative we've built in the industry so far. To date, as I mentioned, there are more than 120 publisher participants in this program that have generated over 30 million in customer lifetime value since these programs launched in 2018. We will also continue to support entrepreneurship in journalism around the world. A thriving future for news requires more entrepreneurs to start tomorrow's great journalism companies. To that end, we have made a substantial investment in new online certification program for niche media entrepreneurs at the Craig Newman Graduate School of Journalism. This program will train dozens of journalists and entrepreneurs from around the world over the next couple of years. To elaborate further on the COVID-19 relief, the news industry is working under extraordinary conditions to keep its people informed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And at this time, when the journalism is in need more than ever, ad revenues are declining, the economic impact of the virus, local journalists are being hit especially hard, even as people turn into them for critical information. And therefore, we will continue our efforts to support on the local journalism part to support in this pandemic. Last but not least, we're supporting fact-checking organizations and combating misinformation. Fighting the spread of misinformation on our platform is one of the biggest focus areas. We have partnered with over 70 third-party fact-checking organizations around the world who are certified to identify and review and take down content that is inaccurate. Next slide, please. We also recognize that a sustainable future starts with monetization tools and strategies. We know that you and other publishers are innovating to create sustainable business models that fund your newsrooms and fund your work. That's why we have developed these tools, many of them in close collaboration with the industry, that help publishers make money on Facebook. We appreciate that not one size fits all solution will work for everybody in such diverse industry. It is up to the individual news organization to decide on what tools makes the most sense for them. Next slide, please. So if you allow me to make a quick review of some of these tools. Referral traffic. Referral traffic helps businesses develop new audiences.
Hola, parece que perdimos conexión con Fares.
Parece que está hablando, Ricardo.
Pero no escuchamos el sonido, ¿verdad?
No se escucha.
You're muted at the moment. Welcome back.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. So I was saying branded content, create paid partnerships with brands that will sponsor your content produced on Facebook. Next slide, please. The path forward is collaborative one. It is a path that, when involving both governments and news industry, is the surest course that we can deliver the objectives and assurances to the news industry. Next slide. To learn more about our project and subscribe to the newsletter, obviously, you can go to www.facebookjournalismproject.com, and you'll have all the details about some of the information I mentioned and beyond. And with this, I am happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ferris. That was really wonderful. I have a couple of questions for you, but then I hope others will jump in and ask questions in any language you're comfortable with. Jorge, if you could mute yourself so we don't hear your personal call, thank you. And people should feel free to either just jump in or put things in the chat or the QA box. So my first question is, some have suggested that Facebook is trying to find the balance between freedom and facts. Others have said that there can't be any freedom without a common set of facts. How does Facebook look at that divide? And specifically, you talked about suspension and shutdown of people who propagate falsehoods. What happens when that's the country's leader?
Look, that is a great question. So just to maybe stress on a couple of points regarding our fact-checking process. So although we fund the fact-checking program, the fact-checkers have complete independence on how they verify facts and the action that they take. If somebody is struck with a fact issue, there is an escalation process and an appeal process that we also remain independent of. Now, the challenge that we face, as you can imagine, is because of the the extensive reach of the platform, we are part of the social fabric and social conversation of every level of society. So we have now over 35,000 people who do content moderation and checking, in addition to the 70 external organizations that we use for fact checking. And so one aspect is that this is a constant effort. We have zero tolerance, but that does not necessarily mean zero occurrence. And so, we constantly try to strike that balance. Now, on the point about certain members of leadership that might be involved in some of these issues, we have taken the difficult decision on occasions where we feel that it represents a risk, especially around COVID, where there is a health or safety risk to our community. We have taken down content, and case in point, I think the famous case of the Brazilian president around some comments about COVID that were taken down. So where although we don't necessarily check things that are not flagged to us by the community or not flagged by the fact checkers, when there is this health and safety issue, we definitely have a zero tolerance policy regardless of the source. Now you're on mute, Michael.
Thank you. I like asking questions with multiple questions inside of it. So sort of roughly what percentage of your traffic comes from Latin America? It's my understanding that Spanish language is the third largest language on the internet now. And so why is there not a Spanish speaking language in the news tab in the short run?
Okay, that's a great question. I'll have to get back to you on the percentage of Spanish speaking on the platform, or maybe one of the LATAM team might know on this more accurately. But in terms of the expansion of NewsTab, NewsTab is a relatively new product. It's currently rolled out in the US only. We it's common practice for us to roll out product or test products in different markets before we roll them out globally. Most of the time, they get rolled out in the US and then expand. The expansion usually takes multiple factors into consideration. It's the product market fit, the dynamics of the market, where we see that these products would have the greatest need or success, etc. And hence we draw a roadmap for these products. And in many cases, there are many products that were tested in Latin America ahead of other markets. I think that the dating app is one of them. We are piloting certain things, fact checking on WhatsApp is piloted in Latin America ahead of other countries. With global, we are doing things, many things in these markets. Obviously, Latin America is a very strategic market for us. So on the expansion roadmap right now, I would say Brazil would be in wave one outside the US. So it's definitely on the map and definitely something we want to roll out. And we recognize the importance of striking these type of commercial deals to the importance, not just of the consuming audience in Latin America, but also the global audience that consumes Spanish and Portuguese content from Latin America. It's just a matter of scaling up, which even in tech takes some time sometimes.
For News Tab, is a market always defined by a country? So there would not be a Spanish language News Tab, it would be an Argentina News Tab.
Yeah, so for the US, for instance, we started with there is basically consumption, and then there is input, right? Content input. So you have to deal with publishers from that country. So for the US, we started, it's in English, and we started with publishers in the US, but we also started adding publishers that get consumed in the US, even though they're not in the US, in English. So, it works very much like a newsroom. There's curators around the world. So we have New York, London, Singapore right now, but they curate from other publications that the US audience would consume. So they would pick headlines that are relevant to the US audience since that product is launched in the US. The strategy would eventually be similar. So it would have a country focus because that's where the consumption happens, but then the sourcing might have a global element if it's relevant to that particular country.
Thank you. Open up the floor for questions. Trying to get the gallery view. How do you, I'm prepared to keep asking. So how does Facebook think, there's a famous piece about YouTube that the more you're on YouTube, the more extreme you get. That's how their algorithm works. How does Facebook think about bringing in contrary opinions to your feed?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. I think especially after 2016, we have started taking this matter a lot more seriously. Historically, the algorithm tries to predict the type of content that you're most likely to want to see or engage with. At any given point, and it gets more and more competitive as more and more people on the platform and more people are posting more. But at any given point, the last stat was something like for any particular post that you might see, that was selected out of 1,500 potential other posts that would have been bespoke for you. And it takes into consideration inputs like time of day, what you've seen, your friends, your engagement, et cetera, et cetera. post 2016, as we saw, the world going into a much more polarized approach, we've also started reinforcing, exposing audiences into also different points of view. So the fact checking aspect of it is one of them, right? Like, so a piece of news is flagged to say, this has a question mark in terms of its accuracy. It also would alert you if you're about to forward or engage with a piece of content that is not fully accurate. And there are also experiments to show you the same story being covered from a different point of view. So, a big global story that is flagged to you, say, would you consider reading this, but from a instead of a right-leaning publisher, from a left-leaning publisher. At the end of the day, the big challenge is that Facebook is very much like a reflection of society, and people engage, in social circles that are many times very like-minded. So, when you're exposed to your network of friends and you're exposed to your circle, whether it's geographical, ethnic, or just even ideological, you tend to move in very similar circles. And so this challenge, we recognize the responsibility that we have, that it accelerates this engagement as a platform. And hence, it's our responsibility to try to expose you to other circles. But inherently, it is a reflection of your social network, which exists in real life. And that's where we've taken on the extra burden now to try to at least provide you with that information for you to make a more educated judgment.
You're not going to fix all of our own individual social ills.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's just, I think, a lot of times, when people, I think, point to some of the issues, I recognize as an organization that technology has accelerated how news travels and the level of engagement. But fake news is not new. It has always existed. It just travels quicker now. So is, as you mentioned,
quicker and farther.
Quicker and further. And hence, we take measures as a communication company. We take measures to try to limit that. Now on WhatsApp, if a message is being highly forwarded, now it can only be forwarded once. It adds friction to your ability to blast out a message to everyone. Hence why we also deprecate the distribution of certain pieces of content if they're factually inaccurate or harmful. But at the same time, it doesn't take the root cause of thinking before you share and having good intent. I think a lot of times we see things that are not necessarily with bad intention. It's just people did not take the time to verify the facts or to adequately investigate something. We saw this in COVID. We've directed more than 2 billion people to the World Health Organization when they were searching for anything that says Corona, COVID, etc. Out of those, we found 25% dug deeper and clicked on more information that came from accurate sources. So there is definitely merit to the idea that if people are being guided to the right source, they have the good intention to find the right information. But at the same time, there's a small percentage of what we call coordinated inauthentic behavior. This is the foreign intervention in elections and stuff. And we are actively working on removing those, detecting certain patterns. We've removed over 100 of those type of networks over the past few years. Thousands of pages, millions of posts. But I think that falls in a small category of it doesn't cover the majority of users who are simply misguided in some of their decisions, and we're trying to build check marks within the platform to help redirect them to the accurate information.
I have a question sent to me about Australia. I would like to ask why Facebook announced it would consider to close newsfeed to journalistic content in Australia. It was in response to the obligation of paying copyright. Why did Facebook reject the obligation of showing the editors in advance any relevant changes in the algorithm? News editors have experienced several times the risk of algorithm changes for traffic and audience. So maybe you could go a little bit deeper on Australia.
Yeah,
and
sure.
perhaps tell people, maybe not everyone knows exactly what the proposal is.
Oh yeah, so at the beginning of this year, the ACCC, which is a regulating body in Australia, came up with a draft regulation. So it's not actually a regulation yet. It's a draft regulation to regulate how big tech operates in the news industry. And they had some suggestions of some of the regulation, and they opened it up for consultation, which means that they took feedback from the tech companies, Facebook, Google, etc. It's mainly Facebook and Google, actually. And they took also consultation from the news industry. As you guys might know, News Corp is based in Australia, so they're one of the big players there, but amongst others. And then they came up with a draft sometime in July, I believe. They came up with a draft of what they're saying they're inclined to make into regulation. Now, to be clear, we do not have an issue with paying publishers. We pay publishers in a variety of ways already without regulation. I went through some of those today. You publish videos on Facebook today, anything over 3 minutes, you can put ads on it, and you keep the majority of the share. Subscriptions, branded content, instant articles. There's a variety of ways in which you can pay publishers, and we are committed to doing that and more. The News tab was already announced. A News tab, basically, we signed deals with publishers to pay them for their content in an area that is very specific to Facebook. Where we saw a diversion in opinions in Australia were a couple of what we considered red lines that would make the dynamic of the relationship unsustainable. And I'll go a little bit into those. So there is a value exchange of what Facebook brings to news publishers and what news publishers bring to Facebook. And there's an equation there that we couldn't agree on that number, which is okay. That there's a dialogue. We came up with a basically a mathematical calculation based on the data that we know, and we're quite transparent about it, on what percentage of that content is on Facebook, of the content on Facebook is news, and how much that content generates in terms of revenue. And then we also did a similar calculation in terms of how much does that content being put on Facebook generates for the news publisher in terms of distribution, subscription, increased audience, etc. And that the calculation as it stands actually is the news publishers get a lot more benefit from that content than Facebook does. And it's not that news is not important. News is extremely important for democracy and for society, and hence why we invest in news. The challenge is that news is not commercially very lucrative on Facebook. Many of the advertisers, it's not us, advertisers choose to, there's a handful of advertisers that would advertise on news. Many of the news publishers purposefully, they don't many of the, for instance, the BBCs of the world, they don't monetize their content because of their own regulation. So there's many dynamics in that sense. But the biggest red line in that regulation was a mandatory arbitration, which meant that if this was to be passed as a law, we couldn't discuss this, that we would be obliged to comply with whatever number the regulator decided on. And that is just not sustainable. No company would go into an arbitration where there's obviously a divergence of opinion, where the regulator is saying, we will do an arbitration, but regardless of what the outcome is, you'll be mandated by that outcome. That was the biggest challenge, and that was a big showstopper, because it's we welcome fair regulation. We want to make it sustainable. What is not sustainable is to make a calculation that is unfair and unsustainable for one or two companies to carry, not just in Australia but around the world, to sustain an entire industry. If that balance in ROI, or return on investment, is not balanced, and then make it mandatory that you accept the outcome regardless of your point of view. So that's kind of where we are. So we said that if this is made into regulation, then that we would pull out of news in Australia, which is not something it's not our preferred option, but any company could not. It wouldn't be prudent for them to put themselves in this position.
What about
we're waiting for the final outcome.
What about the concept of sharing with editors the algorithm as it impacts news?
So we are the discussion around, it's not just the algorithm. There's implications around user data, that some of the like sharing the user data of consumers of particular publishers, but which we feel violates the privacy of the user and goes against our data policies. I think also, the idea of saying sharing the algorithm is a bit broad. I think there are some logical requirements to saying, look, which we try to do, by the way, like give a heads up. What a lot of my team works on is working with publishers to try to optimize their performance on the algorithm. Everything we do on the algorithm is to optimize the experience for the publisher as well as the user. And so, but it's a very complex system that runs the whole system. And to simply say, like, just make that available to everybody is not a very feasible thing. I think what is fair is to say, can we get some advance notice? Can we figure out how we can best engage with changes in the algorithm? A lot of times when we do changes or tweaks to the algorithm, the outcome also depends on how people react to it. So it's not a fully predictable science. It's not something that we know for sure that if we tweak this will be the outcome. We have hypotheses, and we do it to adjust to changes. A couple of years ago, when we adjusted an algorithm to say to what we called meaningful social interaction, where we got a lot of feedback from users that said, we joined Facebook because we wanted to see pictures of our friends and our family, etc. And now we are bombarded with basically professional publishers, and the picture of my niece's birthday and my grandma's vacation are nowhere to be seen because they don't stand a chance against professional publishers. So we took the stance to say family and friends first, and then and that gave basically was a big hit for many of the publishers. And we took a conscious decision, although we knew it would be not well received in many cases, in the press, which is many of the news organizations, but also it was going to have a short-term economic impact on the company. But this was something that we were hearing quite consistently from our users, and it's something that we absolutely needed to address because it's quite existential for the platform. So we took that, we estimated the impact, and we didn't know exactly how, like with full accuracy what the impact would be, because some publishers adapted in a very creative way and put some very compelling and engaging content, because if the content is engaging and compelling and people were interacting with it, then they were affected less. But if the content was kind of just repurposed content and quite sterile, then it didn't work as well. And so we saw a broad range of consequences. And hence, to answer your question about the algorithm, it's a much more complicated question than just simply to say, look, here's the formula. It's a constantly evolving and very complex formula.
The launch of the news tab and the decision to pay publishers directly, and specifically speaking from the New York Times perspective, fundamentally changed for the better our relationship with Facebook. And this isn't a question, this is an encouragement. I encourage you to roll that out as broadly and as quickly as you can, and go into as many markets as you can.
Absolutely. And I think, and to add to that, not only is it a great tool to increase our collaboration with news publishers, but I think it's also a great tool for our users, to have a dedicated place where they can find news, because we recognize that it's for many of them, they rely on the platform to find news, to find accurate news from reliable sources, that is curated, that is fenced to ensure that not anybody can have access to that, that is, again, curated and structured for the interest of the particular user, is a great thing. And there are, I can tell you with certainty that it's probably one of the products that receives the most interest within the organization, because we recognize its importance to the community, to the journalism industry, as well to our users.
Thank you. And I think we are out of time. We are 1 minute over, but we started 1 or 2 minutes late, so I don't feel bad. So back over to you, Ricardo.